After spending our Thursday in Rosemont, Illinois at Big Ten Media Days, Dillon, Graff, and I are back. Having talked to Greg Gard, John Blackwell, Nolan Winter, Minnesota Golden Gophers head coach Nico Medved, where we're going to talk our four big storylines coming out of Big Ten Media Day today on Talking Badgers. It is Talking Badgers, powered by BadgerNotes.com. I'm your host, Kedrick Stumbris. You can find me on the website formerly known as Twitter at Kedrick Stumbris. Find the show, youtube.com/@TalkingBadgers. Recording here from the hallways inside LeBron Arena as Wisconsin scores twice in the final 21 seconds to get a win over number 4 Minnesota Duluth in women's hockey on an opening homecoming weekend brunch special here before the Iowa Hawkeyes and Wisconsin Badgers play tonight. But we are joined to talk not hockey, not football, but basketball with at Dillon Graff. Dillon Graff, Badger Notes owner, editor, publisher extraordinaire. Dillon, how are you? Are you excited for us to really start digging into basketball season?
Absolutely, man. We got secret scrimmages going on. We got Sister Jean's passing that we all need to mourn, as you pointed out, just the ultimate sicko of college basketball. So going to pour one out for her today. After getting to talk with everybody, definitely hard not to be excited about the season that's kind of on the horizon.
I cannot wait. And we had the opportunity to chat with a lot of people on Thursday. And I'm wondering, Dillon, as we each bring, two storylines here, two apiece, our four big things coming out of Big Ten Media Days. What jumps to mind first for you?
I think the first thing, and I mean, it's not, so we have a sample size now of obviously what this offense can be, but I think just the conviction in which all of the players and the coaches and everybody continue to talk about the evolution of this offense, and that they intend to shoot a lot more threes, and they intend to continue to play at a faster pace. And really just the fact that, I don't know if you felt this way, but I think there's a very quiet confidence that they feel they're going to be better offensively this season than they were a year ago, based on, they're
Yes.
very big into the analytics. And I think that they very confidently believe that. And I think that's really exciting to have, not only have the pieces returning that we do in some of the portal additions, but I think there's a strong belief inside that building that they're going to continue to take this thing up a notch.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that. Like, I don't know if I believe they're going to be better offensively, just because I do think, well, and this is one thing we heard that stuck out like a sore thumb. I think both you and I mentioned it. Was there was a comment by John Blackwell about Hayden Jones, the incoming freshman from New Zealand, and about Hayden Jones' ability, who's just a physical freak specimen, all of 6'7", but like a guard, a guy who plays on the wing, saying he's an impeccable offensive rebounder. And that could bring something to this offense that I think would be very different, where if that is true, that's probably a big reason. If both of that is true, that he is a great offensive rebounder, and it is true that this offense is even better, I think there will be that will be one of the reasons why.
I think just to add on to that, like one other thing we heard about Hayden Jones,
Yeah,
was just how good of it he was, or John Blackwell, I believe, is the one who was talking about how great his ability is to get downhill, and in an offense that's going to be able to space out even more this year, given that they have an excess of shooting. Having someone who is a big guard that can get downhill, but then kind of, have some of that playmaking ability to go along with it. I think if he's gonna see minutes, he could be someone who is a really nice connecting piece for, kind of the array of shooters that they can spot up.
I think that's a great point, because I think for as good as John Blackwell is, and I think John Blackwell has added muscle over the summer, for as good as I believe Nick Boyd to be, neither of them are one-to-one replacements for John Tonje, who just had an ability to be a physical presence on the wing. That this team, I think, really needs if it's going to have in offense as good or better than what it had last season. So I think you are spot on there. The first thing I would point to from Big Ten Media Days is, I guess, the opposite side of the ball, which is, for as good as they think they are going to be offensively, I think they aren't that pleased with how they performed defensively, at least not until the very end of the season. And I think as many points as they gave up to BYU last year, I don't think they were very happy about it, happy about how that game ended.
Absolutely. I think unprompted, we heard very intentionally from Winter, from Blackwell, from Gard. Gard speaks a lot about, how involved in analytics they are, and they're knowing that, they finished 24th a year ago, third in the Big Ten, which actually was a little bit surprising to me to even hear. They did finish the season a lot stronger, and the league continues to play at a faster pace. But he acknowledged that, teams that historically are Final Four caliber are ones that have, their offense and defense in that kind of 10 to 15 range, and knowing the jump that they need to take defensively. And I think that, they feel really good about the length and the versatility of this team and their ability to play defense. We definitely saw them improve as the year went on, and some of that was so many new faces and a challenge they're going to do again. So could be a slow burn again, but I think they recognize there's a lot of room for growth there. And, definitely, I mean, Nolan Winter mentioned that first 3 days of practice, they never touched a basketball. And so I thought that was noteworthy.
Yeah, and I don't remember if we've heard that from players on this team before. I think we probably have.
It'd be on
It
brand.
just feels right. It feels it feels very Bo Ryan-esque, in a way where as much as things change, they do stay the same. And I think they have a chance to improve defensively this year. I probably feel more. I guess this is a good question to ask because I'm not sure which way I land on it. And I'll explain my thing first. My question is, do you think they're more likely to improve offensively or defensively this year? And I think it's a hard push-pull because they were better offensively last year, and it's just hard to envision a Wisconsin team improving even further beyond that. But defensively, while I think there's more room to grow based off of what they had last year, they're losing a lot of really big pieces. They're losing a Steven Crowell, and they have nobody on this team who is ready to step into the shoes of exactly what Steven Crowell did for this team on the defensive side last year. Nolan Winter is far from a dynamite post defender. He is not that, and I don't think Austin Rapp is that either. They don't have somebody flying off the bench in a Carter Gilmore role, in a Kamari McGee role that I feel very confident about them jumping in and filling those shoes. I don't know how good any of their players on the bench are going to be defensively. I think that's something that's very much still up in the air. I don't know what Jack Janicki looks like. Jack Janicki was a really poor rebounder last year. He had the worst rebounding rate on the team at 10.1%, and something that, I've been watching and noticing in practice. I think he is better this year at bringing down the ball. But like that's something they need from that wing spot because that's where they got a lot of their rebounds last year from a John Tonje, from a John Blackwell. I think they have the requisite length to be better on defense. For as much as they talked about their size last year, they maybe have more of it in unique spots this year. Andrew Rohde, really long. I think Andrew Rohde is going to be a really, really good defender and probably a plus defender to replacing Max Klesmit, maybe. I think best case scenario. I can't rule that out.
I think he'll be a terrific glue guy for this team.
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know that I have a definitive answer. I think I could make a case either way. Dillon, do you think it's more likely they're better on offense or defense this year compared to a season ago?
So I think that my answer has changed even just today after giving it some more thought. I think that the offense, I believe in the offense's ability to take another step. And part of the reason why, obviously you lose John Tonje, an All-American. Absolutely nobody is minimizing that. Getting to the free throw line helped make that such an efficient, offense so much. But I started to think about, where this team was a year ago and the way that we looked at them on paper and trying to make sense of it all really early in the season. And by the season's end, they made it make sense with the roster that they had. But I think that where they're at in their offense's progression right now, I think that the roles that they attacked in the portal are way more targeted. And I believe that this system really does have something more to it. Bringing in a Boyd to be that primary ball handler, get John Blackwell back to maybe a more natural spot on the wing where he can, probably replicate some of those things. You also have, like you mentioned, Rhodey. I mean, I think all three of those guys can initiate the offense and be a little bit interchangeable. So I really like, that piece of it all, that I think that they're all three of them in different ways can bring those pieces. But then in terms of the bigs, like Steven Krall shot really well at the end of his career. But he was far from he was not a guy who it was really fluid. It was a natural part of his game. I think they had to pull that 3-point shooting out of him, to make it work in this offense. And now you already know Nolan fits. You already know Nolan's good. Austin Rapp was basically born and bred for a role that I think is what they want this to evolve into. And so that starting five, I guess I see the vision. I think that they're more the fits, I guess, are why I'm buying into it. And I think that they're just going to have five legitimate shooting threats at all times and going to just really open things up. I do think it's going to take all of them to recreate some of that free throw shooting efficiency, but I think I see the vision for the offense taking that step. And I agree that there are questions on the bench, but even, a guy like Bialuskis, I think is going to be getting minutes in the front court. He can shoot. Carrington is someone who I think can shoot well enough. He's a good defender. The staff has talked about that.
Yeah.
I think he's a decent 3-point shooter who could maybe benefit from some of the spacing. And we'll see what Jack Janicki can do. I think he's someone the staff is really relying on to play in a huge role. But he's got to make that jump, and so we'll see. But for me, it's going to be the offense. But I absolutely believe that there's a world that we could see a better defense as well.
I think I agree with most all of that. The Carrington bit, we've seen them go swinging the ball and an extra pass or a skip pass over to him in the corner for him to shoot threes a lot in practice. I think he's got something like a green light, and I think he is for all that we're talking about. The grander commentariat, fan base, media, what have you, for all those folks are talking about all the incoming guys. I think he's probably the guy who I think is not getting enough conversation about him based on the level of impact I think he's probably going to have on this team. I think that's
agree.
Probably true. Okay.
I think he's going to be somebody that they really depend on this year. I mean, he's got meaningful experience. He's played starter minutes elsewhere. He's played a meaningful role on the Minnesota Gophers team in this league. And the number, like, he's somebody who has historically been a really good defender. He is someone who has historically been a pretty good rebounder for his position and shot the 3-point ball pretty well, but not on some great offenses. So maybe there's a little bit more to pull out of him, but I do think that they really value his experience there.
Okay, Dillon, what is the next storyline coming out of Big Ten Media Days that you got for us?
I think for me, it's that we should be higher on this freshman class than we are, and I'm not even saying that we were down on it. I think that I really think this is one of Greg Gard's better recruiting classes from top to bottom, and I guess it's easy to say that before, they hit the court. I mean, you're able to bring in, 2 European players in Bialuskis and Hayden Jones who have grown up playing in systems like this. And they made a point to say just how far ahead they are, even stepping onto campus as late as they did because of just their knowledge of this offense. They're more experienced, and then they spoke effusively about Zach Kinziger. The way that John Blackwell and Nolan were really talking about him, makes you wonder, is he just going to force his way out there with what he can do as a scorer in a really limited amount of time, especially in an offense like this? Is there, can he give you something in, I don't know, 6 to 10 minutes? Is that maybe, it's something to consider. And Will Garlock, Pitt point a direction. That person's talking really, really highly of Will Garlock. and what's possible. And I think at this point, you could sell me on a world where none of these guys end up redshirting. I know that ultimately the rotation is not going to be 11 guys deep. That's not how this works. But I think each of these guys is legitimately in the mix for rotational minutes kind of in the weeks ahead here.
I think you're right, and I think the best way of looking at it is a contrast, where if you look at the way the staff talked about last year's freshman class around this point in time last year, there was some pumping of the brakes a little bit. There was some, they certainly had praise and a lot of love for Daniel Freitag while he was part of this program. But there was a little bit of but he's got to learn to blah, 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 blah. It was, and I know that some of the, Garlock stuff is, he's learning a lot from Bielewskis, by the way. But also some of that is he's learning from Bielewskis, who is a rookie in his own right. And it codes a little bit differently. I think the way they talk about this freshman class, and you're right, there is just seemingly much. They're just talking more about them than I think I would have imagined at this point in the year, where you would otherwise be talking about, wow, look at the impact in Andrew Rohde is going to have on this team. Look at the impact in Austin Rapp is going to have on this team. And meanwhile, just and maybe some of it's that two of these guys are here really late. Maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's a big part of
it. It very well could be, absolutely. I think it's really notable though that I think it was Nolan who maybe brought up, they were kind of talking about how do you replace some of the depth of a Kamari McGee and a Carter Gilmore and a Max Klesmit and some of that. And it felt like Nolan and John both articulated that they felt they had better depth maybe that this season than they did a year ago. And I think that's really notable because we know what the rotation became. I think entering the year, we weren't exactly sure what it was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
By season's end, you felt really good about the depth that you had. The people who were playing off the bench were not a net negative. They each gave you something and they were really good at their thing. But they felt that they had more depth here. And I think that that's really notable. So I'm excited to see, it's the old iron sharpens iron, but who comes out of that? Who
Mm-hmm.
become the top 8 and, loosely use 9th?
Completely agree. It is. I hope nobody heard that the horn sound here too bad. The men's hockey team is practicing now next to me. Yeah, it's fascinating the way that they talk about this freshman class. There is some self scouting there that I think they have done, and they feel really good about adding these guys in, and that's. Again, it's one of these things where I'm not totally sure I'm sold on believing all of it. I think, they're going to play 8 guys, and they're going to play 8 guys, and maybe a 9th sees a couple of minutes in the first half, and that's about it. But it's opening up. There's lots of guys with paths to playing time right now, it feels like still. And I would have been surprised if you would have asked me how many guys have paths to playing times on July 11th. I would say, that rotation's probably pretty firmed up with 7, 8. And it feels like they are far beyond that on October 11th. And that surprises me. The last thing I want to go to is also about freshmen, but about potential future freshmen. Greg Gard went out of his way to say, we're going to take 2 in this 2026 class. We're not opposed to signing another guy, but we are focused. I think his word was, we are really focused on that 27th. Yes, we are really focused a lot on the 27 class, because there are 4 top 100 players in the country from the state of Wisconsin. So it doesn't surprise me that he says we're really focused a lot on the 27 class. I was not one who really believed so much the, you got to get 1 or you got to get 2 thing. I was not really much of a believer in that when that conversation started happening a couple of months ago about this really dynamic in-state 2027 recruiting class. But now that Greg Gard is kind of put that out there, now I'm a little bit of the mind where, okay, you set this, you expectations set this way that you're really focused a lot on it. Now you do have to go out and get a couple of these guys, and it's not just those guys. It's also Ty Schlegel, who's a fringe top 100, top 150 guy who they just had on a visit this past week too. Like they made it clear, even if they all wanted to come here, we can't take all of them. It would make us too young. Like there's only so many spots to go around, but
yep.
We're really focused on that class, and so it'll be fascinating to see in the next couple of months where that gets narrowed down.
I completely agree. That class is, obviously very loaded. They sent out a lot of those offers at the same time. But also, he spoke about how pretty regularly they're having to sit down and map out that path together as a staff of, you can't project out that far anymore. And so some of it is going to be a matter of timing, who's ready to lock in a spot when they are needing them to kind of, are you in or out? But, to have, like you said, you got Schlegel, you've got, obviously he's out of state, but
Minnesota,
Dooney Johnson, Donovan Davis, Conan, Jaylen Brown, like there are so many players in this state that they are, Deuce McDuffie, like there are so many guys in the state that are worth pursuing, and they have really invested. They're getting guys back on campus quite a bit. I think the staff is very clearly going to be pouring into in-state recruits especially when they're of this caliber. This is a unique case where it's very talent rich and there's no reason to leave, your borders, but between in-state and international, I think is where they're viewing the greatest path to continuity in terms of being able to build around those guys that you try to retain. And I agree that that's a really viable path if the talent matches up.
This class is nuts. Like Deuce McDuffie out of Milwaukee Nicolette is the 160th rated player nationally, according to 247, 160 in the country. He's 6th in the state of Wisconsin in this class.
The state has had terrific talent for years, but the depth of a class like this is, really quite impressive. And, it'll be interesting to see when you have guys on staff like Lance Randall, when you have guys on staff like Sharif Chambliss. Now you've got Brad Davison on the recruiting trail, who this staff really believes he is going to be a weapon out there, and he's already out recruiting, Greg said. Which I thought was pretty notable. He's probably only been in town for a week. They've got the people there. They have that. Greg was really intentional about this role needing to be boots on the ground. I think this is a big piece of it. And so having that flexibility with your staff to be able to do that and pour into, your state, it's exciting. It's going to be fun to watch and see how that unfolds.
Couldn't agree more. That is our 4 big storylines coming out of Big Ten Media Days for the Wisconsin Badgers men's basketball team. We'll be back at you. Dillon, I haven't really talked about it. I don't know. Maybe we'll do a reaction show to this Iowa football Wisconsin thing that happens tonight. We'll have that. We'll put a notification into the feed if we're going to go live late this evening. But otherwise, we'll be back reacting to the Iowa-Wisconsin game as Wisconsin tries to beat Iowa for the first time in 5 years this evening. Until we talk to you all again very soon. Otherwise, that is Dillon Graff for BadgerNotes.com. I am Kedrick Stumbris of Talkin' Badgers. You can watch the show, youtube.com/@TalkinBadgers. If you want to find out if we're going to react to Wisconsin football, win, lose, tie, maybe they'll tie. Wisconsin and Iowa have tied twice in history. Maybe they'll tie. Subscribe to the feed, and we'll talk to you all again very soon on Wisconsin.